Welcome to SHOWstudio. It's our second roundup panel of the day, and we're going to be talking about the London shows, which is nice. It's our home city. As always, so much going on in London this season. I think what's interesting is London's kind of settled now that Burberry is sort of back on the schedule, but showing in their own unique see now, buy now way. But I think what always makes London sort of it's such an exciting city is the young talent and the new designers who come through programs such as Fashionista and with New Gen support. And there was a lot of really exciting work on show this season. I also think London is a city that is known for sort of outspoken political fashion, which obviously feels more sort of relevant than ever when everyone is trying to sort of send messages with their collections. I think actually this is something where if you're a younger designer, you're probably actually in a good position because it feels somehow more authentic if you're trying to make a statement than if you're sort of some giant luxury brand that's part of that was Freudian, that's part of a huge conglomerate. But before we sort of dive into those themes, I'll let my fabulous set of panellists, who are all looking very colourful and like exciting, which is nice because it's a London panel. Usually everyone wears black. Introduce themselves, starting with you, Hilary.
Oh, hi. I'm Hilary Alexandra, editor-at-large for Hello Fashion Monthly and a judge on Britain's Next Top Model.
Ooh.
Wow.
Why haven't you asked me yet, Hilary? It's okay.
Unfair competition.
I'm Stavros Karelis and I'm the founder and buying director of Machine A Store.
I'm Dino Bonacic and I'm the online editor at Because Magazine.
I'm Sasha Wilkins. I used to be a fashion editor, most recently at the Wall Street Journal, and now I run LibertyLondonGirl.com.
Hello, and I'm Alex Fullerton and I'm fashion director of Stylist magazine.
It's a very strong panel, lots of very successful people. My first question actually relates to sort of the form of Fashion Week. I'm aware that you're people who are always going to see the shows, covering so many things, trekking around the world. There's so much talk and conversation at the moment about Fashion Week and whether it's still something that works as a format, you know, the fashion show, but also this concept of these grouped fashion weeks in key cities. And I'm just interested, what is everyone's take on that? Like, do we think that Fashion Week should continue in its current form? Do we think it's important and relevant? Or is everyone slightly erring on the side of actually, no, this isn't a sustainable system? Sasha, what do you think? You're raising an eyebrow at me.
It's interesting looking at my kind of blogger peer group who've all stopped going to the shows. There was this huge thing maybe 5 or 6 years ago where if you were a newish blogger, the thing you had to do was go to the shows. I can take myself out of that because I've been doing this for 10 years now, but it was you must go to the shows and fight for a ticket, and the British Fashion Council got their knickers in a twist and had a digital panel where bloggers told them how they should look after bloggers. And now I don't think people are that interested. Certainly all the people I know in the blogging world didn't go to the shows this season.
Why do you think they didn't go? Just because it's not where the money is in terms of blogging? Is it not what
I
their
don't think the
readership
readers are interested in it. They want to see what people are wearing at the shows. They don't want to see what people are wearing on the runway.
Yeah.
I think that's been clear for quite a long time now, that there is that big division, you know, all the people that Sally Singer hates, those people. And I think there are people who go to the shows because they want their photo taken, and people who go to the shows because they want to see the clothes. And there is a huge divide between those two. And I think that's what's interesting moving forward, is how do you deal with all the people who want to be there because it's a circus, and then the people who are there because it's their job.
What you were kind of looking at that quizzically. What do you think, Dino? Do you agree? You're nodding.
Well, kind of, but I mean, I don't know. I think it's that's been, I guess, an ongoing thing. The whole battle of the, you know, like people that visit the shows and people that work there, as in like, you know, write about the shows. But then I don't think that's kind of what makes or breaks the existence of the shows. I would be interested in what Stavros says as a buyer, to be honest, because I think that's one thing that people keep forgetting when talking about the shows and schedules and men's, women's, and all that. Yeah, co-ed shows. I think it's kind of the buying world and then the press world that kind of goes with it are the ones that are tailoring it, the schedule now.
What is your take?
Well, I think that they are very, very important to us, and especially, you know, during Fashion Week. I mean, I completely agree that at some point, you know, it can become a circus, you know, outside from a show or something like that. But that's not the point of Fashion Week, and definitely, you know, most of the designers try to safeguard themselves, and actually, you know, they invite to the shows people that they are important to them, which is basically buyers and press mainly, that they attend these shows. Now, when it comes down to London Fashion Week, and especially because we're talking for lots of young designers and emerging designers, what is extremely important is that the Fashion Week becomes the reason why all the international buyers travel to London and come and see the shows here. And that is something extremely important, because when it comes down to press, sometimes you can work out your way around a show without perhaps even attending to a show, because you can get a press release, you can see the pictures online, so you have like a good review of a show. However, if you're a buyer, when you visit somewhere, then you get in contact with the brand, with the designer, you see the collection firsthand, you get the first glimpse and first feeling when it comes down to the show and what makes it exciting or not. And for that reason, I think London Fashion Week is very important. Very important.
So, do you think we'll get to a point where there's almost a split, where there's the kind of more trade show-esque shows that buyers attend and buy from, and then there are these brands that do these huge sort of public-facing spectacles where it's all about celebrity and maybe their top clients can come?
I think it's already happening somehow, I mean, it maybe not to that great extent, but I think it does happen so far. I mean, there are definitely, as a buyer, basically you have a very heavy schedule, because you have to go to so many different fashion weeks and attend to so many different shows, and you get a very specific schedule that you cannot miss, basically, because you have to buy these collections. So it can get very tiring at some stage, but you have to do it, and this is what your job is. By attending to the shows, you're not going to decide right there what you're going to buy, but by attending to a show, what you're going to understand is the whole feeling and the vibe of the collection. You're going to see other people, and the response to the show, and you start formatting an idea about what you want to buy later in the month when you're going to be in Paris doing your buying. I think that because it's something that lots of times as a buyer, and I have many people that I know of around the international buyers, and it's a way of us, and I think it's for the designers, for BFC, for everyone, to see the importance of a fashion week. And when lots of buyers are attending to London, that makes it extremely interesting and very important.
Yeah, and it raises those designers
It does.
up.
I mean, I think that perhaps, for the future, an argument would be for the brands that they do both menswear or womenswear, or, how instead of spreading from starting from January and going until basically March to attend to different shows because of menswear, womenswear, perhaps to change the calendar and do it a bit tighter, or in a different kind of way. Sometimes it would make things easier.
I tend to agree in some ways with Stavros, but I don't think you can be you can generalize by saying that there's the great big extravaganza on one hand and then the sort of trade showroom type show on the other, because in the middle, I think, is where you get possibly the most interesting shows, which is young designers doing something, as you mentioned, through Fashionista or New Gen or Fashion Scout. And I still feel, I mean, call me a dinosaur, but I still feel it's really important to have that visceral connection.
You said that.
What?
I also want to make a gif of you going, call me a dinosaur.
But it's a connection. I think since I've stopped going to Paris and Milan, since I left the Telegraph, I do it online. It's nowhere near the same.
Yeah.
But at London, there's the atmosphere. You can feel, I don't know, there's a sort of spirit of the designer. You can touch the clothes. You can really see the makeup. You can see what the manufacturer's like. You cannot do it with a sort of virtual connection on a screen. Unless it's a designer you don't really care about.
I just want to say on what you say, which I completely agree, is that London has done something extremely important, is that they launched, and I think it was the first fashion week that we saw so many presentations happening for it's exactly that, right? So apart from the same format that everyone had a catwalk show, London, I think it started with new gen fashionist, especially with new gen fashionist, they launch the presentation basically format that designers can showcase.
Yeah.
And what was very, very interesting about that is that, as exactly Hilary said, you can walk into presentation, you can spend your time there, you can go very close to the model, the designer normally is there,
Yes.
you can go and talk to them, directly, they can give you a brief and you can ask any questions you want right there. And you get a very personalized experience in that space that probably, with a 10-minute show, catwalk show, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
And that format traveled everywhere right now, because this is something that I've seen even, really big brands and high-end brands right now going down to the presentation road instead of doing like a catwalk.
Yeah, it is interesting though. I guess the question that I'm interested by is but what about the final consumer? Like, do you think like a stylist reader, for example, is aware that it's Fashion Week, is excited that it's, what's your take on it? In
I
terms
hope
of,
so, because we tell them about it and we try to tell them relevant things about the show. So when Tommy Hilfiger went to Venice Beach, we did a roundup on that and talked about they could go and meet Gigi in the Brompton Road store. So we do create a buzz, but they're things that are relevant. And Fashion Weeks have been essentially a trade show. They're an industry-facing thing, and I think it's only recently with bloggers and social media that the outside world has been able to get more access to it. We've all got jobs to do. You need to write your orders, I need to choose what shoots I'm going to do in the magazine, so it's still quite archaic in the way that it's presented, and there are great presentations that are coming through that are really helpful. So it's a tool for me to do my job for the next 6 months, to choose what my readers should take away from it. But it's nothing beats, and for me, it's kind of a bit, onomatopoeic.
Yeah.
I need to hear the music, what they're playing. I need to see the girls walk. I need to see what the set is, and then that helps trigger whole ideas.
What's going on?
It's normally
busy.
dead quiet.
Do you want me to give it
Yes.
we dispose of Hilary's phone?
It doesn't even ring when I get a phone call. Sorry.
So you think that it's more kind of significant for you to see a catwalk show rather than a presentation?
No, not necessarily. It's being in the shows in their format in the different cities. Presentations are amazing because you can get up close, you can touch things, like you say, you can talk to the designers, and there will be music playing, and you can see the girls that they're casting and the hair and makeup. And whether I see it in a presentation or a catwalk show, either just give me the chance to be there and see it.
Do you get the sense though, with this whole see now buy now thing, like obviously the Burberry model and what have you, do you get the sense that your readers, I guess it's the same for you, Sasha, do you think they would want to go to those kind of things, and as like almost do you think they would work as a form of advertising? Because like we're so used to sort of print advertising or TV advertising, and I wonder if that kind of, everyone always talks about experience being everything now, and I wonder.
Don't know anybody who's ever bought anything from a see now, buy now at a fashion show. I don't know that my readers care.
Yeah.
I really don't think they care, and I always get the impression with Burberry that they're not aiming it at the British market. They're aiming it at Asia and America. I don't think the British shopper cares that Burberry are doing see now, buy now.
What about
think they
something like
less than care.
Topshop? Do you think that it works for them?
It's very expensive, Topshop Runway, their
Yeah.
Runway collection. The dresses are like 300 up to
350,
900 quid.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd think twice about that, so I'm pretty sure and that's for the press discount.
Yes, so 250.
I don't know that they care.
Everybody wants to see, and when the whole thing happened, my editor was like, how are you going to address this in the magazine? Are we going to do something revolutionary? And I said, well, our readers expect to see clothes in the magazine that they can buy right now, and they don't care what the designers are designing it, whichever season.
Yeah.
If they can see something in the magazine that they phone up the shop or go in or go online and then they can't buy it, then we're doing them a disservice. So whether it's spring shown in February or September, it's kind of irrelevant. They just want to buy it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's why a lot of bloggers stopped going to the shows, because a lot of bloggers' revenue comes from affiliate marketing. So they don't want to show clothes that people can't buy. They want the clicks because they want people to go and buy the clothes. So I think people might buy things from the Runway if they've seen it filtered through Alex's pages in Stylist or through my pages on my blog. But I don't think they're going to make that immediate purchase until someone's told them to make it.
That's interesting.
But I remember, when the first conversation started about a year ago, and there were the big announcements of the brands that they were doing it, and I was asking in an interview, especially because of the young emerging designers, and if everyone should follow that type of example. And there were quite a few that actually were debating at that point where they should turn into buy it now, see it now, buy it now situation. And I was quite vocal against it, basically, because I said that this is a very dangerous example to be followed by anyone who is not Burberry, basically. And let's face it, this is or someone that is in that type of multi-billion industry that basically, also the main majority of money and revenue and income is not coming from just what you see on the catwalk. Is basically based on cosmetics, on perfumes, on so many different trench coats when it comes down to Burberry. So I don't know perhaps how important it is to them just the catwalk pieces, and how much revenue it comes in the company just from these items, or because they can afford to do it. But I don't think that this is a type of model that can be followed by any of the designers. Probably, from 80% of the designers that I know of, it's extremely risky situation to go down that road. But of course, if you're Burberry, you can do it.
Or
you can
Chanel.
do anything. Or Chanel.
Look at the rocket.
You can do. Yeah, exactly.
It's funny, isn't it, that they had a rocket, but they've still got a 6 month delay on it.
It's
like, what's your priority? The giant
that's
rocket.
exactly what I wanted to kind of touch upon, because I think that is true. But I think then again, when you think about it, it feels like the whole system is kind of, archaic.
If you say a broken system, I
No,
just I need one more headline. It's like the fashion system is broken.
No, not broken at all. I think it's just archaic. It's just old. In the way that why would you? There's like these extremes. Like you either see a collection and you have to buy it, like you buy it right away, or you have to wait like 6 months.
Yeah, there's no
there's no like kind of in between. Then you have the capsule collections, blah blah blah. But then I think the whole system of Fashion Week, the whole system of buying collections and seeing them, it's kind of like very archaic and very kind of structured. And it doesn't really have to be, I think.
No.
I think no one goes, I always say that, no one goes into Selfridges like only when the collection, like no one goes into Selfridges like on 2 dates is when like the collections come in. And that's kind of, I don't know, maybe,
I think
and in Selfridges, in Selfridges, for example, none of the brands or anywhere from the stores that I know of, none of the brands are going to drop everything at one go.
Yeah.
No.
So, what has happened right now in all the shops, basically, this is what they're doing because they want, to show new products all the time, pretty much, to the customers, is that every designer, does different drops, in a space of 3 months. Then if you add like pre-collections resource, like if you add like all in between capsule collections, limited edition items, different collaborations that designers are doing, pretty much covering that 6 month period, like that you see new products coming along every single month in the stores.
So you don't have to wait 6
So
months.
that kind of goes back to what Sasha is saying then. It's just like, in a way, why then would a reader or a buyer care about this big presentation or shot when actually they're getting the most interesting sort of it's not really reflective when they can just go to the store and see new stuff anyway. I do think what's interesting is a lot of the language around the see now buy now thing is this idea of going direct to consumer, and I thought one thing that both of you said which was really interesting is this idea that people still want someone to tell them to get it, and a lot of people have used the see now buy now thing as if it's removing the role of the the long lead print titles or what have you, like the monthly magazines. But I just think those sort of kingmakers in terms of buy this dress, this collection is great. It's just changed. It's just people on Instagram.
But
now. It's
that
like they see
Burberry
a
are
look.
doing appointments with NDAs well before the show.
And the best thing is when
the
they
buyers,
send the images, they put the person's name over them so they would know if anyone leaked them because it would have their name on it.
So it's all a bit of a con, I think.
Yeah.
Don't you think though that there's people either at the shows or watching on Insta or YouTube or wherever, or SHOWstudio, who maybe necessarily aren't going to buy, even if it is buy now, but who are seeing the show or watching it for inspiration, for a jolt of excitement and fun, or maybe because they're interested to see what Gigi Hadid is doing, or which new model, or what's happening, because they want to feel a connection with what is fashion all about, and it gives them
If Burberry
adrenaline.
didn't think that editors weren't important, they wouldn't be doing the preview appointments.
No, exactly.
They clearly
They
still
were.
think that the role of the editor is important in order to tell people to buy stuff.
Yeah.
And if they didn't think it was important, they would just be going, yeah, buy it all at the show, guys.
Yeah. Well, they probably wouldn't show it at Fashion Week. There's tons of brands who completely bypass the whole Fashion Week system completely, you know, in like a Palace or something like that. Do you know what I mean? I like always talk about Palace.
I was at Pure. I spoke at Pure London, the retail show, and it takes over like 5 halls at Olympia now. And it did slightly blow my tiny mind that there are a lot of quite high-priced brands now that just only exist within the direct-to-the-buyer world, which I'm sure obviously you know more about than I do.
Yeah, no.
But
Sorry, go ahead.
no, but don't you think like has it been like even a month since London Fashion Week passed? And like today or yesterday, Christopher Kane dropped his collection with like the Beauty and the Beast thing, and it's like quite a large capsule collection. It's not like 5 pieces; it's like more than 20, I think. And it's kind of like incredible to see like that kind of, you know, Christopher Kane is not a mass market brand that sells, I don't know, like constantly, and you don't see that much of it. It's not a Burberry brand. But then like just after, obviously that's something that's been planned and everything, but it's just kind of like
Money.
Yeah,
Money,
exactly.
but that's money.
Disney are
That's
just
just doing it.
injecting all
That's
the money.
exactly, but that's what I mean. Like I think that then like Fashion Week becomes kind of like a sideshow, even to Christopher Kane as a designer. I mean, not to say that his show isn't great, but I mean, you know, it seems like it's not really the only focus of a brand.
No,
and
well,
kind of,
because you know, if you even with the huge brands, it's like they might have their show, but they might have an H&M collaboration coming out 2 months. If there's I think the problem is there's too much stuff to push all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But you know what I just remember now, actually, you know, that I was, while we're talking about this, lots of times, you know, with different meetings we have, you know, with really young designers, and you know, we talk about like what kind of format they want like to showcase the collections, and they have to choose between presentation or fashion show. Someone once told me, you know, that actually the reason why we're asking to do like a catwalk show instead of a presentation is not because we prefer it, because actually it's more expensive to do, you know, it's quicker, it's smaller, it's way more difficult. The reason is because, you know, if we don't have that catwalk image, you know, the press, not so much, you know, in UK, but internationally, and especially in the Asian market, they're not going to go on print, you know, if you don't have like the catwalk images, you know, the ones. And this is how lots of times, you know, you can think of perhaps why designers think that it's extremely important to have a fashion show.
Yeah.
You know, we're not talking about the massive ones and the big ones that always are going to have a fashion show, but we're talking about the young designers that, or you know, someone like Christopher Kane even, you know, that they obviously the Asian market is massive to them. So how do you have this in print? How you know, customers see these collections? Because if you want to browse a collection, the first thing that you're going to do is going on your iPhone and go on you know, site and start like browsing the looks, basically.
And you look at the looks.
So you need.
And there's a certain cachet to it being like a catwalk look. You know, people always, you see that, like retailers use that so much as a way of sort of.
But there is brands like, for example, Alix, which you know, they never done a show. I mean, this is what I admire about them, you know, so much. They never done a show or a presentation, and they, if you see the amount of stock is, the amount of press that they have, and the popularity that they have as a brand, it's massive.
Well,
it's
the same as
exploding.
Supreme, or
you know,
what,
it's
you
the
know,
same
there's
as
so many
Supreme or
ways of doing
Palace,
it,
for example, or you know, so many other brands that they do that, and they never ever showcase on presentation shows.
Yeah.
But then you have, I mean, designers like Molly Goddard, you know, for example, you know, where it's sort of is a balance between presentation and catwalk. I mean, for a start, there is no kind of traditional catwalk. And I mean, she had, you know,
Well, it was in the
set up like-
Tate tank, so it was like a
but
lap.
then there
But
was
they were
a
like
huge
sitting down so you can actually
table,
look
as
at
if they
the
were having-
dresses
yeah.
after they've walked. So
they were
kind
having
of,
sort of like a dinner party, and there was fruit and food.
She's a good
and
example, though, of a designer who,
Fabulous.
there was a massive conversation around her at Fashion Week. The question, if she wasn't showing at Fashion Week, would she have had the reach that she does? I think probably not.
Probably
No.
not, no. And I also think she's got, her business is probably actually at that level where she can invite some of her best customers to the show. So she doesn't have that kind of problem of, is it for press and trade, you know, is it trade show or is it a public facing thing? Because I'm sure she can invite, you know, people who are very supportive of her label.
But she's somebody who did presentations like the Sandwich Factory so well that we all loved, but still showing in the tanks on a catwalk format is still an aspiration.
Yeah.
It's still kind of like young designers, I want to do a catwalk show.
Yeah.
And like when Hilary did their first show, Kim was like, I wanted to show on the catwalk in Paris.
Yeah.
It's still kind of a huge goal.
It is a goal, you're right, it is that, and also I think we're guilty of it as press. It's like, we talked about this on the panel earlier, is this idea that, if someone suddenly stops doing a show, you do think like, oh, did they run out of money? Something's gone wrong, if they suddenly do a presentation from a show, even if that designer says, I just want to try something new this season, but everyone's like, business is not good, so it's like, there is that thing stuck in your head.
Got people like Phoebe English who've made like the idea of presentations their own. I mean, I can't imagine like a London Fashion Week, whether it's women's or men's, without one of her kind of like whole, holistic like performance show experiences. Exactly, and it's like kind of, and it's so perfectly timed always. It's either at the beginning or in the middle, and it's just kind of like makes your day better. And the same again with Ashish.
Yes,
it's like kind of like
that's
wonderful. I mean, for the last 2 seasons, it's been amazing, like fucking brilliant, like in that way where it makes you happy. It makes you kind of survive the rest of Fashion Week.
But then there's Gareth Pugh, who sometimes in the past has had a film.
Yeah.
Black and white, but Ruth Hodgman, just a black and white film, and you sort of stand watching it in a black room.
Yeah.
There are amazing ways of, but I think when Gareth did that, what was really interesting is I've spoken to Gareth, it was ages ago, it was like spring, summer 13 or something, but he even lied to, it was at Paris, but he lied to the scheduling people because he didn't want to say I'm going to do a film because he knew they'd take him off the main schedule.
Oh, right.
So they kept it on and thinking it was going to be a show, and then everyone turned up and it was just this film.
Yeah.
And then he said the funniest thing is afterwards people were like running backstage to try and get a backstage interview, but there wasn't a backstage. They were just running around
looking for the clothes.
Looking for something to see.
But going back to Ashish, actually,
talk to me about Ashish.
I really want to make a mention about this show, basically, because I think what Ashish does is extremely brave and also, extremely important to us, because it's, he shows exactly what, to me, quite a lot of times London is about, is, the diversity, and especially at this stage, in time, politically wise and socially wise as well, it's so important to have someone, to take that type of stand, but not in a pretentious way, and not kind of in, this is very fashionable to be political at this stage, so because he's doing it for quite a bit of time. And obviously Anna Trevelyan, who is like his stylist, also feels extremely important about all these issues, supporting LGBT rights, talking about like different like political and social views, but it's a show that makes everyone to think, and it's actually a really good experience to attend an Ashish show, because it gives you a lot of feelings and a lot of food for thought. I think.
I cried. I genuinely cried.
I think everyone.
I know.
Yeah.
Like I was like sitting and like sobbing at some point, and all the like the music. Yeah. No, it was amazing. It was like a proper experience, and it was so kind of you went through it. You sat down. It was a show with clothes, without it trying to be a performance. It wasn't at any point. It wasn't like, oh, let's do something extravagant to make a point. No, it was the clothes with the music, with the set.
Because this is a collaboration with baseball.
With the American Baseball League.
It was like basketball, baseball.
It was baseball. It was like all the, which is kind of incredible that such a big institution like baseball, which is not, I mean, baseball as a sport is not necessarily a gay sport, and to kind of to go into face of Trump and like as such a big American institution and collaborate with a fairly small designer, it's not like a big American designer, and to do that, I think it's incredible. I don't know if it's been heard around America though, but I think it's been heard quite loudly around London.
Do you think Ashish's benefit? He's always had the same, beautiful, bright, sparkly aesthetic, which has not been a thing.
Yeah, now it's becoming a thing.
But do you think it's partly because, for example, Gucci we've brought back everyone suddenly wearing a lot more colour and glitter and whatever, and suddenly it's Ashish's moment again, because he's just consistently done the same thing for years. But I noticed so many more people talking about him last season, and it wasn't because of the political side of it. It's just because they were like, oh, sparkles and unicorns.
Yeah, it feels.
I think that with Ashish, I mean, as much as I follow the brand quite closely, obviously, but I think it started about 3 or 4 years ago that it kind of like people start connecting with his brand quite heavily.
Yeah.
But also for us, to lots of times, to think about, the strength of a brand and how it goes is that when you see, worldwide, internationally, how customers react to a brand.
Yeah.
And he has a really, really big following everywhere. I mean, even, and a very wide audience as well.
It's one of those brands where there are people who are really committed to it, you know, where they like it and then they'll wear it all the time.
Exactly.
From the Tesco sequin bags that were like,
Yeah.
what, like 4 years, we still see them around Fashion Week. And
I do think the Gucci point is really interesting. Someone wrote in the comments at the palace, they were like, can Lou get through a panel without talking about Gucci's?
Obviously, no.
But no, I
Maybe.
can't. So talk about Gucci. But it is a really interesting point because I think with Gucci is you kind of wonder, like, it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing because I think Gucci have 100% brought back like this kind of maximalist, like cluttered spirit. But then you wonder, like, that's something. It's like who influenced who? Was Alessandro Michele always looking, while he was designing under Frieda Giannini, was he always looking at like Medium Kirchhoff and Simone and being like, oh, I wish I could do stuff like that. And then it's kind of like by his aesthetic, as it's such a huge brand being so pervasive and everywhere, I think it has made the work of these younger designers just seem more relevant and appropriate, which is really interesting, that kind of process of inspiration and kind of circling, because I did feel that like London has been it is very colourful and it can be quite saccharine and it's kind of like willfully like quite girly actually. Like London doesn't really engage so much with that androgyny thing, and it just felt very appropriate this season. Like it felt much more. I don't know, like I was looking at the Ryan Lowe show and I was thinking,
Ryan,
it was really great, but it felt also really like fashion as well. Whereas for a long time, I think it was quite easy to look at design like Ryan and think he kind of does his thing and it's separate to fashion, but it felt very much like
Dilara
Findikoglu,
say her name.
Dilara Findikoglu.
I always
I
call her
can say that
Dilara.
because I can say that because I'm Greek and obviously I can understand the reaction.
I just say Dilara.
Yeah, but I mean it's Dilara. Yeah, I mean she's a great example.
No, I think that's like an example of being like she's been doing that for a while now. Like she has her own aesthetic that's like kind of like I'd say it's a bit angry and it's a bit kind of rebellious in that very London way. Like you kind of imagine a London designer being a bit of Victoriana, a bit of everything, like Armageddon and everything thrown into one. But it kind of like 2-3 years ago, maybe you couldn't imagine someone wearing those clothes. Like now I can completely see people, and not just fashion people, but people wearing those pieces.
That last look, babe's not.
With the horns.
But also I have to say about this one, because when we see collections like that, and when we see designers like that, I think that lots of times stylists are playing like an extremely important role. Like to designers, in especially that stage. And Dilara is working, exclusively with Ellie Grace Cummings, who is like a great and amazing stylist. So I think that the reason, one of really main reasons why a show like the presentation, actually, because there was a presentation, looked like so powerful was because also of the input of the stylist, of course. But Dilara is doing that, and she has a very, very strong audience follow her, like a very, very strong audience. And
I also think when you're
she's really
young,
big in LA. I was talking with Aisha Renzo, and they were telling me that when they had like the collection, after a week was all sold out.
Really,
in the
that's
store.
interesting.
I mean, you can
Yes.
totally
Not very
see
LA
that.
girl.
It's very
I can't
LA.
see that. In my head, everyone in LA just wears like leggings and.
No, but everyone in LA
I've
wants.
never been.
I think when you see people I don't know, like Instagram kind of vibe of LA of like those, it's completely kind of like Dalston-y in that way, where it's like you kind of see that's when all that comes in, where you see that London has influenced like all around the world, and it's not it's not that just America is serving us their own things. Like I think London has, and the whole atmosphere of London and London Fashion Week, London fashion designers.
But all the principles of London Fashion Week feel more apt than ever. Like this idea of counterculture, subculture, sort of vibrancy and confidence in your sexuality, all of those things that London has always kind of championed, regardless of what was going on in the world, because they're things that are really central. So
and regardless of fashion too.
Yeah, exactly. If you think of like punk, Lee Bowery, all the things that people draw on a lot, or they talk about when they talk about London fashion, those those issues that now every house is trying to kind of communicate about have always been central to sort of the way, like Gareth Pugh has always talked about those things, like all of these designers have always talked about those things. So I think it's also why London feels really...
It's coming to its own, in a way.
Were there any standout shows that you guys really liked? Anything that particularly struck you?
I was particularly happy with Mary.
Mary Katrantzou.
Because last season I wasn't as excited by it as I hoped I would be. So this was one I was kind of gunning for. And when the sparkles came out and the magic, it was back to what you would hope her collections would be. It was really strong.
Really strong.
So that was, it was more of a kind of watching a career trajectory rather than just pure collection.
It's really interesting when you say watching a career trajectory. Oh my god, I can't speak. Trajectory. Oh my god, why is that word so hard? Because I do think it's interesting with Mary, like watching her over the last maybe like 3 or 4 years try and kind of shake off that digital print queen thing and move into a more like texture, surface, embellishment. And there have been some ups and downs, and I think there were certain collections that people didn't take so kindly to. And it is interesting that now I think of her so much in terms of texture and embellishment, whereas if you think she's been really successful in, I think there were other brands that exploded around that digital print moment who've never managed to really progress aesthetically, whereas she totally has.
She's always tried, and sometimes it's failed, and sometimes she's fallen back on it, but this time she's kept on trying and done it. Like the velvet suits with the looks that I really remembered, and they had a kind of a print on them, but it was more the luscious colours and tones rather than the print.
Peter Pilotto is kind of one of those brands, if I can say. I mean, it's kind of like there, and it's interesting from time to time, and it has some interesting stuff, but I think they kind of are in that, digital print. And I think Mary and Peter Pilotto have been kind of competitive because it's a similar price point, it's a similar client, it's a similar aesthetic, but I think Mary has become kind of like more of a interesting global brand.
She's just a huge brand.
Yeah, exactly.
Her cleverness, I think, was about 4 years ago when she first started working with Lesage, and she said, right, I'm going to do that extraordinary, incredibly expensive embroidery.
Swarovski.
But it's the thing that you were saying, that right from the beginning she has sold and sold and sold and sold. I remember going to her studio after her second collection, and rails going off to boutiques in America and the UAE.
And she travels so much and speaks to these women in these different places who are buying her clothes.
Yeah, she's a trunk show queen in the best possible way.
But the thing that she's been really clever with, it's really interesting you mentioned the Lesage thing, I think, is justifying the price of her garments, because I think that's the thing that a lot of London designers get to a point where they're kind of successful and their clothes are very expensive, but it's like, why buy that rather than Prada? And Mary's she's almost made herself it feels so bespoke and so worked that it's always, whereas the Peter Pilotto thing,
show looks from Mary Kay.
Yeah.
I went to Singapore Fashion Week when Colin was curating it a couple of years ago, and if you ever wondered who was buying 12K Mary Kay show looks, they're buying them in Singapore, and it's the whole thing, and they just buy them as a nice party frock. 12K.
It's crazy.
But it's kind of that vibe, I think, that Erdem is been successful with. It's like finding a customer, making them pay for it, and doing it kind of smartly, you slightly twist it for each season. But
I really like Erdem's shows.
Me too. I mean, I'm not saying anything. That's not a bad thing. I think people like him and Mary Katrantzou bring that kind of groundness to London. That's still a kind of fantasy, or Preen as well. I think those are kind of fantasy-based designers that still sell, and people buy them and wear them, and I think I can imagine them in the Stylist as well as as well as in Vogue, and that kind of it's smart.
But if you're buying from Neiman Marcus and Dallas, where I know Erdem's done trunk shows, you like something like this because you feel you're getting bang for your buck.
Yeah,
it's not going to scare people too much, and it's sexy in an understated way. It's very, very clever for the international market, I think. I think it's easy to forget that London does that international clothing so beautifully.
Yeah, really, really well. And I also think it's interesting to see stuff that's this kind of, it's interesting to say you get your money's worth, because so sort of worked and beautiful. And if you think the climate in a lot of really sort of high luxury brands is this very sort of slouchy, I don't care. If you look at a Balenciaga collection, I know it's slightly kind of flipped it this season, but the fact that a lot of things are these kind of deliberately cheaper looking materials and not very worked, I do think there is a certain consumer that wants to feel like if they're spending 12K, they are getting something that has a fuck ton of sequins and gems on it, not a kind of a
explosion.
challenging collar.
An explosion in the throat.
Not like a cutout.
Yeah, not like a
something
cutout and a
missing
really
rather
long
than
sleeve.
something
Yeah,
extra.
something added on rather than
Something that
Do you
husbands
think
will
it's a
understand.
Yeah, well, do you think, I don't know if it is that though, because I always feel like with Erdem it is like women buy it and like it.
I know a lot of people in like Saudi Arabia and stuff like who wear it for weddings because it is kind of modest in a way.
Conservative, yeah.
It is conservative, but it's again like very kind of embellished and powerful and loud. In the
Do you think it's like a reaction against sort of the whole kind of athleisure, sport, gym look? You know, you
I
mentioned
think
leggings, you know,
That never
hoodies,
happened in
all
London.
of that. No,
Right? I mean, it never kind of
No.
became a
But that's why,
thing
do you
in
think-
London. Yeah.
I think
designers
this
like
was a
this,
reaction
yeah.
to a lot of. I think this is part of that modesty movement that like came along, I guess, with people like Mia Grazia and Pier Paolo when they were at Valentino and
the
Simone. Kind of, it's this idea of kind of. It's not like prim, but there is this sense of being sort of covered up.
The Queen
and-
as
I think
well.
women
kind of
designing
Yeah.
for women
with Sarah Burton.
because
it's not bodycon.
because women
No.
definitely don't do that kind of anything like the same.
Are there
degree.
any female designers that do that?
Well, I was going to say Victoria Beckham, but
Yeah,
back to the question: any designers?
Even she has. Oh, very good.
Ooh, shade. But they do. I mean, there are young designers. There's
You're already saying what everyone's thinking.
Sorry?
No, it's fine. It's fine.
It's okay. No, but there are I think there's younger designers that do that. There's like kind of there's a new
Yeah, it's
designer that was
actually
in
really
Fashion East.
Mimi Wade.
Mimi Wade, and also that first look. She had a presentation just before the shows.
Yeah. It's
please.
Supriya Lay. I think I wrote. I can't actually read my
I
own
think
writing.
it's Supriya Kele, maybe? Or-
That could be
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think, which is incredible because I was talking to someone who was there with me, and I was like, this is finally someone who's not, like white and just British and or that's kind of was a fashionista thing for
Yeah.
a while. And she had like kind of a
Is she
very
half
sexy.
Indian?
She I mean, she has Indian heritage. I
Indian
think she's
heritage.
probably born in England.
Yeah.
But Supriya Kele, I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the whole vibe was kind of merging the two in a way that was sexy, but also.
I do
religious
have a
and stuff
slight
like
problem
that,
though with people continuously in every press release I get at the moment. It's like blurring gender expectations or like
Yeah, I mean-
subverting traditional understandings of femininity. And I'm like, are you?
when the clothes are interesting, you can kind of justify that because everyone has a journey written in there. Like
Yeah.
from Burberry to Matty Bowen. I mean, no,
Yeah.
can't confirm, but it's like everyone has the word journey.
Yeah.
Did you
There's
see that
somewhere in
Russian designer who did the kind of mother and daughter looks?
No, that sounds cute.
It was like that sort of modesty, slightly old-fashioned, a bit Erdem, but mother and daughter, and they had child models. It was a presentation in
no, I
the same
didn't
place
see
as
that.
Supriya.
My pet peeves though are
really?
dogs and children on the runway.
Oh, this-
Like when they had the,
Mulberry used to do it, the poor dogs, it's so
I know the
terrifying.
dogs would be like pulled. I did not like that at all.
No.
But Dolce had baby. I know.
Let's
They
not.
had babies, which was actually
Let's
quite
not.
cute. But one of them was like so confused. She was like, "What the fuck am I?"
Yeah, but that was
And then she was like touching everyone along the front row on her way
No,
back,
Babies and children, no.
and she looked so
No.
stressed.
And not dogs either.
Very wrong.
No.
I mean, Lettuce may come and do SHOWstudio, but she ain't ever doing a fashion show.
No, I'm not feeling that.
I sat next to J.W. Anderson. I sat next to
A
a
baby.
girl, a baby, but literally, I think it was about 7 weeks old.
No, I like it when people bring their babies to fashion.
But
Why?
it slept.
No.
It
Because
slept through the whole
Because you're at
show.
work,
They need
imagine
ear
if you're a woman
defenders.
and it's your weekend, just take your baby.
But they
Like,
need ear defenders.
Yeah, they need ear
and-
defenders. The lights
Ear
are really
defenders.
bright. It's really
Would you
noisy.
not- would you take your-
no?
no.
I mean,
and
you-
she wouldn't really get it. So
yeah.
it's,
You're like
it's
she
not-
wouldn't appreciate it.
She's got really definite visions on what she wears anyway. So
but it's
I
not.
think when she's older, then you
She'd
can.
hate the shoes.
Yeah.
She would hate the shoes.
She might like Mary's.
She'd like the Disney bit. She'd love Ryan Lowe and Hello Kitty. That she'd all over that. But
Oh my
You
God.
can like target her for or like verses if she's a bit older, so she'd like Zayn and all those people.
God.
There's like people of different. Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah.
Moving from babies and different things, one thing I did love was Tatum Jones, because I felt that their nod to diversity
We don't have pictures, sorry.
They had a guy, an amputee, the Runway. They had various people of differently abled people, but it really didn't feel like a gimmick. It absolutely felt like it was their philosophy that they feel that fashion should be for everybody.
But that's
and
kind
I thought
of the
that
same thing with the sheesh. Do you not
and
think
I loved that.
Yeah,
especially
exactly.
if Tatum was the opening show. And the clothes would be actually some really beautiful dresses, I thought.
Yeah.
But my sister's disabled, and I really am fed up with not. I don't need to see people being wheeled down a runway in a wheelchair just to make the tokenism.
Yeah.
I would like some kind of acceptance that we're not all 6 foot tall and size 6.
Yeah.
Or
Marquez
20 years
Almeida.
old.
Or 20, yeah.
Well, that's why Simone's show.
Simone.
Oh my
Yeah.
god.
It was
fabulous.
really amazing that the
Simone's
casting
was
was
super
absolutely
amazing.
beautiful.
It was really clever with Simone's as well, because if you think, you know, Simone's just become a mother, her own mother, Odette, is so important to like what she does. It's such, you know, her dad, I think she's done a really clever job of acknowledging, you know, how much support and advice she's got from her dad. So when you think of Simone, you do think of like lots of different generations.
Of course.
So again, it didn't feel remotely gimmicky that she used older women. And they looked amazing as well.
Yeah, there was like
they were
the whole
beautiful.
space and stuff.
She
It was
looked
like
amazing.
Yeah.
I think
majestic.
what I felt about London, the way, you know, the diversity, the whole age thing, the different sizes, disabilities, it looked completely natural.
Yeah, totally.
It didn't look forced or
No bolt-ons.
Yeah.
it was just fantastic.
But that's because also you think, you know, when you're working on, I mean, there are differences between someone like a Simone and someone who's just starting out. But when you are working on a really small budget, like there's no room for gimmick. Like you have to be authentic in what you're doing because you don't have the money to tack on some like rocket for Instagram or something. You have to like, you know, everything you do, you believe in because you're spending money on it.
Marquez Almeida. I mean, that's exactly what they do.
Wasn't
they
that
do
great, though?
I mean, you know, that's a very kind of, you say you don't want to see people who are like 6 foot tall and 20, and yeah, that's their reality in a way, and they have like girls who they get inspired by, and the girls actually choose kind of their own looks.
Yeah.
And for like that's been an ongoing thing. So like they get to choose between a few looks that they have, and like they ask her like, so what do you feel more comfortable in? And you know, and it's kind of, you can see that it's like genuine. It's in, you know, the Truman Brewery. It makes kind
Well,
of
it's very
sense.
youth focused, but then that actually does make sense for Marcus and Mid because their
That's
clothes
exactly
are
what
at a
I
lower
mean.
price
It's about
point.
different type of diversity for each
Yeah.
designer. For Simone, it's something else.
Well, Simone's clothes probably are bought often by an older
Exactly.
woman. They are very expensive. You know, they're very
Exactly.
beautifully made. They are expensive. You know,
Yeah.
you're not going to buy those if you're. Whereas Marcus and Mid, you can get. You know, it's kind of it's contemporary level. It's like Acne prices, so
Yeah,
it's
it is.
feasible that like some, you know, quite well-heeled 18-year-old could wear it.
Yeah, and it's
So-
like cool girls that you see on Instagram. You can like
Lots
check.
of cool girls.
Yeah, and it's kind of like smart, and it's not probably inexpensive for them. You know, you don't pay agencies, you don't have that. That's
Yeah.
also smart from a designer point of view.
Well,
Is it
that
one of the
sense
girls who works here wearing, see like that middle
a lot of the girls that work here wear a
The
lot
yes.
of my. Oh, Laura has that.
yes,
Yeah,
that's like a vest.
Shout out to you. A lot of us here are quite big
On
Marcus
Marcus
Almeida
Almeida.
fans, so we are representing.
What about Paula Noor? Has anyone seen the presentation?
I haven't
Because
seen the presentation.
Yeah,
Tell us about it.
because she's a new gen. She's
Yeah,
like
I know
on,
her work.
Yeah,
Her second season. I think.
yeah, it's her second season, and I think she's definitely someone to watch. I think has been one of like the most exciting designers, you know, that are coming out at this stage from London Fashion Week, and she has a lot of things to say.
It's more like tailoring-y type stuff.
It's
isn't it?
actually, you know, the way that she's walking around the garments and stuff is a lot of construction, but it's a lot of like, it has to do a lot with like the female body and the way that she cuts her fabrics is absolutely amazing, and you know, it's extremely flattering in terms of sizing and everything, and she's extremely smart designer actually.
Yeah.
And the quality and fabrics look really good. I think she's a great designer to watch.
It's interesting to see someone like her though, alongside, you know, a fellow very young female designer, which is like a Mimi Wade, because
Yes.
it's presenting a very different view of femininity. And I am interested why there are quite a few of these very young female designers who are doing this, you know, stuff that if a male designer had done that, you would probably be a bit like, oh, it's quite objectifying, and it's
So
this
if he
line
has done
of
something like Mimi, for example, you mean?
Yeah,
it would be like,
totally.
Or Amy Robertson, another one.
yeah, but I think it's difficult, isn't it, to know
I love.
what's reclaiming something and what's progressive and what's
Or is it more that we're now allowed to wear pretty clothes? Because there was definitely that period where you just didn't do pretty at all.
You'd have to be tough. You had to
you
be
had to
tough
look like
and
a
like
guy.
mean and androgynous.
And you've
Now
got-
it's okay that you can wear tulle and reclaim your femininity.
Yeah.
It was like,
Be fine with it.
Yeah.
I think it was on an ASOS panel last season where one of the girls from ASOS was saying, if the worst thing you can say to any girl who works at ASOS
That's
is,
pretty.
that's very Celine.
Oh, Celine.
Oh,
Because
really?
all they want to do is look like an explosion in a tulle factory.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do think it is part of that sense of like you can look however you want to be taken seriously. I think it's just, we've done like stuff about it on SHOWstudio before, like we did this girly series. It's just working out, how much of it is, whether it is progressive or not, like that. No, it's that whole Simone de Beauvoir thing, like presenting as a doll. I just find that really interesting. Whether it is.
I think there's
Or maybe that younger women feel they've got more power these days. Therefore,
Yeah.
they don't need to wear a uniform to fit in, to get somewhere that they can express their personality. And also that codes in the workplace have changed hugely. When I
Yeah.
started at Condé Nast, I wore little black dresses and high heels. And I don't even own anything that looks like that anymore. But
Yeah.
equally, anybody else who started at Condé Nast these days, again, looks like an explosion in a tulle factory.
Yeah.
there's
It's interesting though.
There's two kind of new gen designers that I really kind of always have to pinpoint as completely different but very similar. It's Marta Jakubowski and Sadie Williams, who are like
Yeah.
good friends.
Yeah.
And they're both kind of creating women's wear in
Yeah.
that like, Marta's stuff is way more kind of, I would say, overtly sexy. It's kind of statement in that like I'm going to show one leg and cover the other, and kind of, it's very cool girl, and her presentation was absolutely amazing because she was playing Shaka Khan and Tina Turner, and it was like on the first day, and you got in and it was like this kind of like, oh great, fashion week, it was like such a good momentum there, and I like stayed there way too long. But then Sadie Williams is a designer that I personally love for some, I don't know, it's just so beautiful to look at, and it's this kind of like her prints and her sparkles and knits and all that, and it kind of is like that new, I think it has that moment of heritage and Britishness that a lot of British designers a lot of the times go away from, and she
Well, I
kind
think
of
it's because a lot of British designers aren't British.
yeah, I mean,
like,
but even the ones they don't kind of embrace it as like, being British, and her stuff is that kind of, celebration of Britishness and youth.
But also the show kind of, it bridged that gap between a sort of catwalk extravaganza
exactly.
and a very straightforward, on the rails presentation. So it was a bit of both, and you could
I think
interact.
I think Sadie is probably one of the strongest young designers when it comes down to anything that has to do with textile. I mean, and print. I mean, her work is amazing. I mean, she has been. Her work, has been shown before, independently from clothing, like because she won awards before in the past because of that. But what is very, very interesting to see with like these new gen designers, both of them, Sadie and Marta, is that seeing them, especially, I mean, I've seen Marta since her RCA graduate show, and we're working with her, for example, all these seasons, which haven't been that many. Same applies to Sadie, and when you see them season by season, is how these very young designers grow to become, a business basically, and this is perhaps something that is very, very important to many designers and young people that are watching us right now, because it's extremely difficult to get, and you know that extremely well through like all these designers and graduate fashion week, is that it's very, very difficult
Well,
way
we should
to
take
get
a
in there.
moment to say sad for Sibling, because
Yes.
they're taking a
It
hiatus.
is. It's very, very sad thing that what has happened, but I think also it's a very brave thing as well.
Yeah, it's a
Because
brave.
Marta to do that.
I think it's a very, very brave thing, because sometimes things don't go the way that you have planned that they're going to go, and nothing means the end of the world.
No.
It's nothing. And
Well,
it's
look at
actually-
Jonathan Saunders at DVF
Or
now.
Mika
That's
Kirchhoff
lots of
and- Yeah.
people, many hundreds of people, have gone down that road. And if what is extremely important for both Cosette and Sid are that they're extremely talented people with so many years of experience and hardworking people. So I'm sure both
They'll
of
be
them
fine,
are going to be well in whatever they're going to do afterwards. I mean, it's going to be missed deeply.
But I
like
think
from
it's
London
about
Fashion Week.
redefining your understanding of success as a young label. Like, I think people see success in fashion as quite a linear process. Like you launch your label, you get more sales each season, you get bigger and bigger and bigger. You maybe get bought by a luxury group, you do a perfume, you start doing bags, you get a shop. And actually maybe success should be seen more in terms of contribution. So actually, even if you only do, like I was thinking a lot about Richard Nicholas' season, obviously, but also people like Medium Kirchhoff, who offered such a great contribution to sort of like so many of these designers today, their visual language wouldn't have made sense if you hadn't had like Ed Medium and Benjamin Kirchhoff doing the work that they did. And I think you should think of it more in terms of contribution than like, you know, that people have to constantly be progressing and growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
But also when it comes down to Sibling, just a comment for that is that Sibling took a part in Fashion Week overall that it was extremely difficult, and that is knitwear.
Yeah.
You know, that's why you see brands are not easily involved with anything that has to do with anything knitwear, because it's a very expensive thing to do, a very difficult thing to do, and your market is very it's quite minimized, because actually, you know, there are many countries and shops and buyers that are not going to buy knitwear into heavy knitwear, at least because obviously, you know, the climate doesn't help where they're located, and they did that in the most perfect way possible, you know, extravagant way. They brought that type of happiness. The shows, every time that you were going to a show,
the men's shows was like
everyone.
I would always end up being like really close to the naked men, because you know they would always like there was a way he like removed his towel and he did it like I was like right there. I saw things I couldn't unsee. It was stressful, but they were so fun. Like, I love even the men's shows kind of more than the women. They were just like
the fact that they did both men's and women's show, like that's why I always think it's like such like so much money spent. Like,
it's so expensive,
that's like four shows like a year, and for knitwear, for something that's so kind of niche, and even, you know, the stuff that they do, it's not like John Smedley knitwear. It's like out there knitwear. So to do that, I think it was like it's even amazing for how long they did that. But as you said, I'm sure that they're gonna do something.
And I think they have definitely left like their mark in the London fashion, and definitely, you know, they're going to be 100% remembered for what they have achieved so far, and they will do like amazing things in the future.
I really like that idea of like the roster of designers over the years who now don't show, who've maybe gone on to different things, but all having their place in the pantheon that they've.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't know, like people like Russell Sage, who's now an interior designer, but stuff, or Hamish Morrow, or any of those designers in the 90s. They've all, you can still see their influences in different ways, and I love that.
Same with like Louise Gray, people like that. You do think there's such a huge, amazing influence. And a lot of what's nice is a lot of those people sometimes do go back into things like education, they're teaching, and you think like, how amazing for those students to get someone who did those kind of amazing shows. Like Andrew Gross teaching.
Andrew
Fabio.
Gross is teaching now, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Or Fabio Perez.
Fabio. You know, Louise is now in CSM. Actually, Louise Gray is in CSM, and how brilliant show was the CSM MA show this season.
It was really brilliant.
They definitely need a massive mention for that, because it was a thing on the first day, also Fashion Week. And they I think, you know, the attendance of people, but also what surprised me was that the international buyers that I saw in that show, it's
like the best attended show at
it
Fashion
was,
Week. Like
everyone is in CSMMA show.
It was like packed.
And it's great. I mean, it was super strong.
And really different as well, because it felt sometimes like, I think Louise Wilson had such a clear eye that sometimes it would feel, I think, with her show, with the shows where she was, when she was heading the course, and I don't mean it as a criticism, because the collections were so strong, but you would sense a sort of a theme that would run across a lot of the collections, whereas this was a bit more messy, but I kind of liked that about it, because it also feels reflective of what fashion's like today, where it is a bit sort of messy and all over the place.
Some stuff was very kind of CSM in that way, you know, like it's crazy and overdone in a good way, but some stuff it was very, I was like, oh, like for example, one of the winners, the girl, the one that had the long skirts and all the variation, I was like, that, I don't think I would see that in a like CSM show, like kind of 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
And that won the award.
She won one of the awards, so that was kind of interesting.
But that's like a lesson in conviction and idea.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because it kind of stood out in all of those crazy, like all the craziness and volume, it just kind of stood out. Can I just say one thing, which is really funny? Yes. No, I won't. No, is that the only thing? Like, we've done we've talked about so many people and we haven't mentioned like J.W. Anderson except for the baby talk,
Oh, sorry.
which I find slightly
If it makes
significant.
You feel better, last
do you know,
season when we did the London Roundup, we talked about him all the time.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I don't feel bad for him. But I just feel like it's kind of like it makes.
It wasn't
It
my,
makes a point that we
it
didn't
wasn't my
talk about
favourite
it.
of his
Exactly.
shows, this one.
I wanted to say one thing about London, that I think for the first time I started to not necessarily think of people like JW and Simone and Erdem and Christopher as young designers.
Yeah,
I almost put them onto another shelf, and instead it was the people like Sadie and Marta and Matty.
Perfect.
That,
This is what we want.
no, that I was suddenly seeing as
The
a
future.
really
Yeah.
new rising tide of stars.
Yeah.
And not that they're toppling Erdem, etc., off their perch, but they're sort of shuffling and
No, they
jostling
definitely
into the
are.
limelight and
I think
make room for me.
Yeah.
J.W. Anderson is one designer that I think it's kind of suffering from that, from not being the new kind of it thing anymore, a new bright new thing, however you want to call it. I think he's been that for much longer than Erdem, because Erdem and Mary and all of them, and Christopher Kane, like they all kind of find their own place and markets, and J.W. was kind of the crazy new kid.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of that story kind of
I
is
think
done,
it's just
and he needs to
changed.
find. I think he needs to find a new.
Well, also Vetmont
way.
came along, which kind of
Yeah.
took, you know, he had like
Yeah.
the coolest gang, like him with Ben Bruno and Jamie Hawksworth and, you know, Ashley doing the casting and MM Paris and all of that. And then I don't think he's like been toppled. I still think it's, I'm super excited to see
The exhibition.
the exhibition. I was thinking about that a lot when I was looking at this collection, because obviously he's curated this huge exhibition at the Hepworth in Wakefield, which would have been a huge amount of work. And I was kind of looking at this thinking like, God, imagine trying to do both at the same time.
Plus Leve.
But
Plus
you know,
whoever, yeah.
But I just want to say about, I mean, regardless of if that specific one was a good one or not, you know, I think that his importance as a designer is again very, very significant, because he is probably the most successful example of young designers coming out of London, you know, and that actually, you know, he was the first one to achieve something so high as he has achieved from his generation of
Yeah, no,
designers.
totally.
And that is a big statement, you know, to what is happening in London and why people should look at London. And by people,
But the
I mean
weird
the
thing is he
industry.
never defined, I think part of the reason he did that so fast is because
Yeah.
he never really defined himself as a London designer.
Yeah,
Like he
and
didn't hang out with the rest, you
No.
know, the rest of the
Yeah.
gang.
Yeah,
like,
they're all together.
They're together, like Erdem is friends with Roxanda and what
And they
have
support
you.
New Gen and they support, you know,
Exactly, whereas he's
everything.
not-
He would
he
not. He
always
didn't have
stood on-
nothing to do with any of it. He
Yeah.
didn't do fashion.
He's always
he
had
didn't.
encouraged his
He did
collection.
fashion.
He
He
did.
did, yeah,
He
he
came also.
Definitely,
Yeah,
then-
he
But
came
he
also from
quickly
New Gen as
shimmied
well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, because
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
talk to him.
He never.
Yeah,
he
he's
doesn't
not
talk
like,
about this,
yeah.
but he came out from Fashionist and New Gen,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
But yeah, it's not this,
Interesting.
you don't get that. And also you look at his collaborators, like he's working with French stylists, French
Yeah.
Vogue stylists, you know. I think it's just he's created a very different
Career path.
career path
I
for him,
don't-
and
yeah.
good for him in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I interviewed him yonks ago, maybe 2 years ago for Bonn, and he was talking about those big jobs, like the Chanel jobs, you know, like Com, like Vuitton, like, and he was saying, you know, and talking about how designers are at Prada and talking about how designers are getting older, and he said, you know, who is going to take those jobs? He's like, seriously, who is there? And he's kind
Yes.
of he's like amazingly ambitious in that sense that I don't think he'd ever want to be passed over for a job because someone would be like, oh, he's kind of just a young London designer, and he very quickly has made himself like a like his name does come up, like his name's coming up for Dior, like whereas
Yeah.
I don't know if someone like Roxanda's name would come up for Dior or Erdem's name because they would feel too young when actually he's super young. I think he's been very clever at doing that.
Sort of like a
Outside
young
of the
Yves Saint
fashion
Laurent.
world, no one talks about him, and that's what I think is really interesting about him
Yeah.
as a designer. He's a fashion people's
Yeah.
designer.
It's a
I mean,
Yeah.
Is he a stylist reader's designer?
Less so than say Roxanda or Erdem because
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
accessible, and if they're going to spend money on a lovely dress, then they'll go and get a lovely dress rather than something that might. What is that?
So that's what I find very
It's quite
curious.
challenging.
But what
Yeah,
about
and
with
we'll
a
turn it the right way
But-
around. And
Yes.
then
But
wear
what
it.
about Loewe, actually? Because, you know, they might not be obsessed right now about J.W. Anderson, but what
Yeah.
about Loewe? Because I think that this brand has been, you know, in
Well, the bags,
best.
I think.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
and everything. I mean, I see the type of customer that walks in the store. You know
Yeah.
that they're like always holding something in a bag, like
Something
that's
lower.
something lower. Yeah, it should be like the
I
keyring.
think
It should be the bags. It
Instagram
should
is
be
It's
the
just sunglasses,
you know.
or
I mean, they.
belts and stuff.
Yeah.
I think that Pierce bag has done a lot for getting his name. You know that one with
In
the.
terms, and it's
For the
very-
JW, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Cochrane
And the
bag.
parcel at Loewe,
Yeah.
they're things that are instantly recognisable, and no other,
Yeah.
not that he's an archetypal young London designer, nobody
Yeah.
else has got those recognisable things.
No.
No, Chris K's got a clasp, but you don't put a name to it as
Yeah.
you do with those other two bags.
No, he is very, very good at that. But I also think, going back to sort of what we were saying about contribution, like if you think when he did all of that gender bending stuff,
His menswear collection.
but no one else was doing
Yeah.
that back then, and it did look kind of like. I remember people walking out of that men's show, like Spring Summer 13, with all those
The
ruffles.
fleur shows, the
And
ruffle
the
shows,
shorts
yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah.
riding boots.
The ruffle,
And
yeah.
people,
So
but
good.
people were already angry. They were like, "What fucking gimmick? So stupid!" And now everyone's like, "Gucci, so progressive."
Yeah,
Like it was just a little bit too early, you know.
But he did it. Like I don't think that Gucci would. I mean, maybe that's a big statement, but I don't think Gucci would do it or do it that well if it wasn't for J.W. Anderson
Yeah, no, I
in
think-
2013.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I go back when I say like, I think he's a genius, and I think what he does is like really, he's kind of super creative in his campaigns, and it's all beautiful. I just don't think like, and I always like, I see these collections, and then I kind of wish they were more like the 2013 boots and shorts with a ruffle.
But I think it's about a taste level,
Yeah.
isn't it? That's what he's good at. He's good at having,
He's a stylist designer. That's what a lot of
Yeah.
people say. He doesn't come up with like something. It's not Celine. It's not something that.
I think it's really similar to Celine and how he approaches
think?
it. I think it's
Okay.
similar to how Phoebe Philo approaches it, which is picking interesting references and
Yeah.
twisting them together and creating something.
But
I
the
think
net
he's so
result
good at
is
that.
that Celine can become a uniform, whereas this is never going to become a uniform.
Yeah. I
No,
think
that's very true.
Yeah.
That's very
True.
true.
Exactly.
But also
Yeah.
JW doesn't really have, apart from not hanging out with the London pack, so to speak, he doesn't really have a London presence. You're not like, Christopher Kane.
I don't know. I think he does like the workshops he does. I think he's been quite clever.
Yes,
at-
But in terms of retail, perhaps.
yeah.
By the
I
way-
think he's good with the cultural cachet thing, like art world.
He's been announced that he's the guest designer at Pitti, and
Yeah.
Yes.
so that's going to be interesting because I think last men's shows, like everyone was like, oh, thanks God for JW.
Yeah.
And then now there
He's
probably
off to
won't be
Pitti.
his show at London Men's Collection, so that's interesting.
But Peter has changed completely the game. I mean, like, think about
Yeah.
like who they have invited, like in the
Yeah,
last
gosh,
3-4 seasons now.
Yeah.
I mean, they started Ralph. Ralph Simmons was showing there.
He'll
like,
get so
this-
much
this is
attention being in
a
Pitti
go-
on his own.
Yeah.
You know,
completely
go
not.
show.
And it's also like summer Pitti. Everyone's drunk. Everyone's gonna love it. Like it's like that in summer. It's like having a lovely time. We haven't talked about Mulberry
Okay.
/ Vetements because obviously lots of no, I mean that in a great way. It's like amazing sign of the power of a stylist because obviously lots of Volkova has started styling this, and it I think has created an interesting.
Can I ask something? I don't
Yes.
understand why this show took negative reviews. I mean, like it's obviously up for discussion, but
Yeah.
I don't.
for last season as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I don't know why people weren't like very extremely vocal about it. I personally found it like
I think it's maybe because Mulberry was always quite a warm
Yes.
brand, and this doesn't feel like a warm
Yeah.
collection.
There are no kittens, there is no whimsy.
Yeah, there's
They've
no
lost the
whimsy.
woodland
There's
animals
no dog
gambling.
on the catwalk, is there?
Yeah, there's no dog.
And no
It was
cupcakes.
also an,
No babies.
carriages.
No babies. Mulberry Catwalk, no babies.
it was also in a big kind of like an aircraft hangar.
Yeah,
with
the space didn't help, I
and
don't think.
you felt really removed. And
I mean, come on,
No
what's that look? The green
connection.
dress, that's like, come on.
So I actually like that. I think
No,
it-
I don't dislike it, but that's like a Vetements dress, like a pre-collection.
No, it's how
Vetements
it's
dress.
styled that makes it
Yeah,
look like
yeah,
that.
I
If that
mean-
was with like a nice pair of heels, and
Can I ask one thing? I don't know who, like I've never, maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see people buying Mulberry clothes. Like I never,
No.
I
It's
never
less-
see
yeah.
the idea of like Mulberry clothes. Like,
is it the bags?
the
The
bags.
accessories?
yeah, exactly. It's like bags that's like a Mulberry brand.
Well, that's why they
Yeah.
hired
But
a
then,
bag
like-
designer to be the fashion designer.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And the
yeah.
stylist to be the fashion designer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's one thing that I really admire about someone like Lotta is when she's given a house to work on. Like she did it with Pucci as well. She was just like, yep, and she just makes it like her aesthetic.
Her thing, yeah.
Which I think is kind of it is more interesting, and I think to see how much a collection can be totally transformed by a stylist. I think that is really, really interesting. It's a sign of the power of other stylists. You realise how much work that they do.
I mean, think about Katie Grant. I mean, you know, with like Miu Miu. I mean, how I'm 100% sure that, you know, her input, you know, like into this brand must be like massive.
But
You know,
then
like in the way that.
But she also, you know, styles Marc
Jacobs.
Jacobs.
Yeah.
So it's not, and you see that it's two different brands. So I think like in that way, and you know, I don't think like, for example, that Lotta could have her own successful magazine as a stylist, because I think it would kind of become a, you know, one
Everything
look.
would look the same.
Yeah.
And I think what she does amazingly is earns money from these kind of jobs where she gets paid to style people in her own taste. And I think why Katie Grant, whatever people think of her as a super stylist, is because she kind of like gets playful and gets and she kind of like creates her own world based on a different world. She doesn't just make, you know,
Well,
things her
Katie
own.
has signatures. You think of like those big, really famous models. You think of things that are quite playful and fun. But she has less of a kind of, and it is, I think, to her
Personality.
strength. She has less of a clear,
personal
you know, like,
styler,
yeah, you don't. Whereas Lotta, it's like, like you look at that and you know it's Lotta.
I
It's
want to see her
awkward and it's a
portfolio.
shoulder and it's an odd colour of mascara.
Yeah.
Which is very pretty. You know, I'd love to wear an emerald green, but
What do you think about when a house like Mulberry does? Do you think this feels off-brand for them?
part of me thought that it felt really traditional, in that there were the kind of the checks that felt a little bit equestrian, the capes, and I could see the kind of like 1970s Mulberry woman in a suit. And I was thinking about this morning, the sort of women that would go and buy a nice Mulberry handbag, probably maybe have their own little business, and then they might go and buy a nice Mulberry skirt suit. So I doubt that what was on the catwalk is going to be in the stores, but they might filter down and have kind of commercial elements of it. So I don't see why they wouldn't buy it.
No, I think it riffed a lot. You're right on that kind of British tradition, kind of. I think it was how it was packaged up, but it kind of goes back again to the conversation we had right at the start about whether you're trying to speak to a fashion audience, whether you're trying to speak to a consumer, and maybe I'm sure.
This is not speaking to a consumer.
But I think
but
people
maybe they've worked out that actually their fashion show doesn't need to. It needs to get buzz. You know,
to
and
sell
lots
the
of hits on Insta.
But vêtements is so like kind of apparent and so everywhere that I think it's kind of going to slowly become speaking to that general consumer. That's maybe, you know, it's not a business like a flower shop business owner in, I don't know, like suburban London that wants to buy a Mulberry suit. It might become, you know, like a different buy, like
I just
different
think
shop.
Mulberry's never going to be cool, though.
You don't
you know.
think so?
No, I think it could.
Do
I
they
mean,
need
like
that?
edgy cool.
Do they
like,
need that though?
I don't
mean, like
know,
this is
not at
this
all.
is this is
Not
my,
at all.
I mean, when
I'm
I
like,
think
do what
about
you
brands,
do,
like,
make a nice bag.
like
The Alexa.
it's fine. Yeah.
Enjoy it. Oh.
And all,
What?
can we?
1 hour down. Okay. Well,
Has it?
1 hour and 20. God, we've gone for ages.
What
Because I don't
about
have a clock or a
Joseph?
watch.
Oh my
I'm so
goodness.
sorry, but I would have gone for 2 hours and not realised. Is there anything?
Having a lovely
Joseph?
time
Or
chatting.
Matty Boven.
Well, Matty Boven in Fashion
Knitwear.
Beast. You liked that?
Yes.
Joseph?
And
Joseph, you like Joseph?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, what's your look was very judgmental. I have to say.
And
No, I was surprised with the urgency with which you
Yeah,
wanted
no,
to
because I think it's such a kind of like Britishness.
and that was styled by Katie Grant, by the way. You know, so
Yeah.
Matty-
No,
yeah.
she didn't. She
Oh,
wasn't credited
she
as
wasn't?
the stylist. She was credited as like a creative consultant
Oh,
on it.
okay.
I think she did style
Good.
it, but because I was reading the notes and I was like, "That's interesting. Why has she put that, not something else?"
Okay.
But I
Cool.
don't know why.
But then Asai was a really amazing one. He was like the
like that?
yeah, the second. Yeah, I really. You didn't?
No.
No? Oh, that's good.
I like Matty's though. I love Matty's.
I
and then
did.
that
I did
was
love
next
Matty,
to
but
it.
I think that Asai is one of like a really good designers. I mean, he has been shown before, but you know, this time I think it was like quite a good one. I
liked
personally
it.
liked Asai a lot, and I like him
But
as well.
it is kind of sometimes it can get so maximal that you kind of
Yeah.
The fashionista this year was kind of like, usually they have different.
Usually
there
they
was
have
like
someone
it
a
was
bit
like Richard
moody.
Malone, and it was Ava Robertson and Matty last season, so it kind of had like a flow. And this season, like Asai and Matty was kind of like coming from a
Same.
similar point
Yeah.
of view, I would
Totally.
say. It
Yeah.
looked different, but it kind of was like, you know, in your face,
Yeah.
which is not a bad thing, of course.
We haven't talked about Versus, which is obviously No?
That well-known London designer.
That well-known London designer.
Yeah.
So that is like celebrity fashion, like at its
Do you
peak.
think, I feel like London feels less glitzy at the moment. It feels like there's fewer dinners, fewer parties,
Yeah.
fewer big marquee things going on.
I totally.
Like 3 or 4 years ago where there were like, 2 dinners every night and
Yeah.
and you didn't do
I
any
just don't think
sleeping.
anyone has any money.
Yeah, it just
Do you know
seems
what I mean? Like,
so-
at all, but they don't.
Except for Versus.
Except for Versus. Yeah.
With the great London designer. So
I
it
think
does
all the
seem-
money
it
went on
seems
the
like-
lighting system. Lazy.
It just feel like London's slightly more now about the fashion and less about the glitz and,
Yeah,
and the
totally.
partying.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think that is having a filter effect onto, like, it is interesting to see how Paris has kind of been reinvented now as a city of cool young label. And I think it's just, I think people's kind of started to see through all of that. It feels also so inappropriate to be having these big, hot, like really frivolous dinners.
It's
and
vulgar,
parties.
it's a bit cringy.
It is, isn't it?
I think, I do think you're right about Paris. I had an interview with Anna Wintour in the summer of 2010, and she asked me to name some hot young Parisian designers, and I kind of did a goldfish impression, and she went, "That's the right answer."
Oh, that's good. But now,
And
think how
now, of
many you
course,
could name.
7 years later.
Yeah, it is true.
That's just about the time when she went to the first Vietnam show, right? So now it's changed.
So we're proud of London then. We think it was
Oh,
good season.
yes.
Did you end on
Good
Versus?
old London.
Oh, really? Let's go back to something that was good. No, yeah, proud of London.
Yeah?
Really proud of London.
Really proud.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
because I think that regardless of what's happening, it's always diversity and youth that is really, really important to London. And I think it's really important to everyone around, and now everyone is paying attention to emerging designers, that London did
Yeah.
it forever.
And fashion does have a such a sort of opportunity to talk and communicate.
And we have very important institutions here that they support emerging designers. Like
Yeah.
Nugent is one thing, but then it's fashion, it's Graduate Fashion Week, it's Fashion Scout, is all these amazing universities. These are the ones that are actually doing so much for all these young designers, and BFC, of course.
And someone's got to say Brexit, haven't they? In a time of huge upheaval where a lot of people's residency in the UK is very much up in the air. It's really important that fashion, this huge multinational industry in this country, is standing up and being counted, I think.
100%.
That's a great note to end on.
It's a positive.
Should we give all the designers a round
Of
applause?
course.